The Grand Unity Festival of the Galactic Alliance was always a spectacle of colors, lights, and music that stretched across the massive space station orbiting the vibrant planet. Thousands of species gathered there every cycle, celebrating bonds, forming friendships, and finding partners for life. Every corner of the hall shimmered with joy. Crystal chandeliers reflected rainbow hues, laughter echoed through the corridors, and the air was alive with excitement. Yet among all this happiness, one presence stood apart, silent and untouched. The alien vampire queen glided into the hall with a grace that seemed both terrifying and mesmerizing. Her wings, black with streaks of silver, moved like living shadows, folding behind her in perfect symmetry. Her red eyes, glowing faintly under the dim lights, scanned the crowd with the calm authority of a ruler who had seen 1,000 battles. She was centuries old, wiser than most beings alive, and yet heavier than anyone could imagine, burdened by loneliness. The whispers began as soon as she entered. Delegates, noble warriors, and even ordinary citizens glanced at her with awe and fear. "The queen is here," they murmured. "The vampire queen unmatched in power." She didn't respond to the whispers. She never did. For her, silence was both armor and shield. She had survived wars, conquered planets, and outlived entire generations of her own kind. She had seen betrayals that would have shattered lesser beings. And yet, in the midst of all this celebration, she felt an emptiness that no throne, no army, no crown could ever fill. Other creatures paired off easily. A shimmering jelly-like being twirled happily with a crystalline elf, laughter spilling from both. Winged reptiles clung together in synchronized flight over the dance floor. Even the smallest, timid species had found warmth in companionship, but moved alone, an island in the sea of joy. No one approached her, not even the bravest ambassadors. Fear kept them distant, respect kept them silent, and a part of her, a part she rarely admitted, longed for connection. She paused near the observation deck, where the stars spilled across the horizon like diamonds in black velvet. The lights of the festival glimmered behind her, and for a brief moment the queen allowed herself a sigh. Her reflection in the crystalline walls showed not just the powerful sovereign, but the lonely creature beneath, the one who had never been chosen, never been held, never been loved. She had been admired, yes, feared, respected, but always from afar. No one dared to step close enough to see her as, not the queen, not the predator, just her. Then, as if the universe had heard the silent plea in her heart, a human stepped into her line of sight. He was different. Humans were fragile, often reckless, yet somehow courageous in ways no one else could understand. He moved with a confidence that wasn't arrogance, it was sincerity. His eyes met hers without fear. There was no bow, no exaggerated gesture, no trembling hand. Just a simple, genuine look, as if he could see the layers of her soul in a single glance. Froze, no one had ever dared. She tilted her head, curiosity mingling with caution. The human smiled, a small, kind smile, warm as sunlight on a cold world. He didn't speak yet, but somehow the gesture felt like a bridge across centuries of solitude. For the first time in hundreds of years, wondered what it would be like if someone actually chose her, not for her power, not for her legacy, but for herself. The crowd continued their celebrations, unaware of the small, quiet storm forming between the queen and the human. Whispers of fear and awe continued around her, but none of it touched this moment. For the first time, the alien vampire queen felt the faint stirrings of hope in a heart that she had long believed to be dead. Hope, fragile yet persistent, began to creep into her loneliness, hinting at something no army or empire had ever given her: the possibility of connection and perhaps of love. Captain Elias had traveled across star systems, negotiating peace, observing alien cultures, and navigating dangers most humans could barely imagine. Yet nothing had prepared him for the sight of the alien vampire queen. He had read about her, her power, her cruelty in war, her unmatched beauty, but seeing her in person was different. She moved like shadow and light combined, wings folding gracefully, eyes burning with centuries of stories he could never begin to comprehend. Most beings in the hall avoided her, some out of fear, some out of respect. Elias, however, felt an inexplicable pull toward her, as if the universe had whispered, "This one needs you." He walked steadily across the glittering floor, ignoring the startled glances and hurried whispers that followed him. Many would have frozen, thinking themselves out of place. Elias felt none of that. His curiosity was stronger than fear. As he approached her, he noticed the subtle tension in her posture, the slight droop of shoulders that told him the stories she didn't speak aloud. The alien crowd parted naturally for her, yet he did not pause. He stopped just short of the edge of her shadow, careful but unafraid. He said softly, almost like stating a fact rather than a question. His voice carried no fear, no hesitation, only calm acknowledgement. I've read about your reign, your battles, your victories, but I want to know you, not the stories others tell. His crimson eyes widened slightly, and for a moment she studied him like one studies a rare and dangerous creature. No one had ever addressed her this way. Not a ruler, not a diplomat, not a servant, never a human. Most humans didn't last a single day near her, overwhelmed by her presence or terrified by her reputation. And yet here was one who stood before her, steady, curious, and unafraid. "You want to know me?" she asked, her voice low, melodic, with a hint of skepticism. "You do not fear my power, my hunger." Elias smiled gently. "I won't lie, I know humans are fragile compared to your kind, and yes, some part of me is cautious, but I am not afraid. Fear does not teach understanding. Curiosity and respect do." For the first time in centuries, felt something stir inside her, something she had buried under years of command and isolation. Could it be trust? The human's words were like sunlight piercing through the cold walls she had built around her heart. She felt her wings loosen slightly, no longer tense and threatening, but moving with cautious elegance. He extended his hand, a simple gesture, human, warm, and honest. "Walk with me," he invited. "Show me your world, your thoughts, your truths." Hesitated, it was dangerous. Humans were fragile. She could accidentally harm him with a mere touch, an instinctive gesture, or even a thought. And yet, something in his eyes reassured her. Something human, yet extraordinary, told her he was different. Slowly, she allowed herself to step closer, letting the human guide the first steps of a connection she had never imagined possible. Together, they walked through the festival's gardens, a place where alien flora glowed softly beneath artificial starlight. Elias asked questions, not about her power or her conquests, but about her thoughts, her dreams, and her fears. Spoke in a voice she rarely used, soft and unguarded. She spoke of victories that left hollow, victories in their wake, of centuries spent surrounded by loyalty that was more obligation than affection, and of moments when even her own immortality felt like a curse. Elias listened without judgment. He did not interrupt, did not pity. He nodded, understanding what could only be understood by someone willing to meet her without pretense. And in that quiet walk, amidst glowing alien flowers and distant music from the festival, something extraordinary began. The alien vampire queen, feared and solitary, felt the stirrings of companionship, a fragile, trembling connection that promised she might not have to be alone forever. For the first time in her long life, allowed herself a question she had never dared ask aloud. Could a human truly see me? Could he truly want me? All of me had never allowed anyone to approach her so closely. Her entire life was a careful balance of control, fear, and respect. Every step she had taken, every kingdom she had conquered, every enemy she had outwitted was proof of her power. And yet, walking beside Elias, a human with nothing but courage and kindness, she felt something unfamiliar, a vulnerability she could not ignore. Each beat of her immortal heart felt heavier, like centuries of loneliness pressing down all at once. The risk was obvious. Humans were fragile. A single mistake from her could end him. Her fangs, her strength, even her shadowed wings were capable of destruction she didn't always control. She had ruled worlds with an iron hand, and now the thought of accidentally harming someone she cared for filled her with fear. Elias noticed the hesitation in her movements, the slight tightening of her wings, and he reached out, gently brushing her fingers. His touch was light, grounding, as if to say, "I trust you." "You don't have to be perfect," he said quietly, his eyes meeting hers. "I know who you are, I know the risks, but I also know that courage isn't about avoiding danger, it's about facing it." His crimson eyes softened. No one had ever spoken to her with such understanding. No one had ever offered partnership without fear or ambition. She wanted to tell him to step back, to leave before she unintentionally hurt him, and yet she couldn't. Something in his unwavering gaze held her captive, not by force, but by trust. As they continued walking, they reached a quiet observation deck overlooking the galaxy. Stars stretched endlessly, painting the void with scattered lights. It was peaceful, almost surreal. Spoke then, sharing memories she had never voiced, battles fought in the cold of distant systems, allies lost to betrayal, victories that brought only emptiness. Her voice, normally commanding and cold, carried a rare softness, a melody of vulnerability. Elias listened, not interrupting, not judging. Instead, he asked questions, gently probing, curious about her fears and her solitude. He wanted to understand, not to control. The alien queen felt the invisible walls she had built for centuries beginning to crumble. She realized how long it had been since anyone had truly listened, without seeking power or reward. Yet the risk remained. Her council had warned her of humans her advisors would never approve. "A human cannot survive me," they had said. "Even one moment close to you could destroy him." She thought of their words and felt a flicker of panic, but Elia's presence reminded her that not all humans were the same. Some were brave enough or foolish enough to see her not as a monster but as someone capable of connection. Suddenly, a warning from the festival's central system flashed across the observation deck. A delegation of jealous aliens, seeing her walking alone with a human, was approaching. They had never witnessed such a pairing and viewed it as a threat to the traditions of the Alliance. Wings flared instinctively, casting sharp shadows across the deck. Her claws scraped lightly against the crystalline floor, a subtle warning to those who dared approach. Elias stayed close, unafraid. "I'm not leaving," he said calmly. "I trust you to protect me, and I trust you not to lose yourself to fear." That statement, simple as it was, struck deeply. She realized that true connection required risk. She could not shield herself entirely and expect to be understood. And yet, she would protect him. Every instinct, every ounce of her power would guard this human who had dared to see her beyond the legend. As the delegation drew nearer, spread her wings slightly, not to attack but to stand her ground. She was warning them. This human was under her protection, and anyone who underestimated her did so at their own peril. In that moment, she felt something she had not felt in centuries, not just vulnerability, but the fierce joy of having someone who mattered enough to fight for. Elias looked up at her, and she found courage mirrored in his gaze. In that silent exchange, understood the truth. Connection was dangerous, unpredictable, and frightening. But it was also worth every risk. For the first time, the alien vampire queen didn't feel like a solitary ruler of a vast empire. She felt like someone who could finally share her world, her heart, and perhaps, one day, her immortality with another soul. The news of the alien vampire queen walking alongside a human spread like wildfire through the festival. Whispers turned into murmurs, and murmurs into outright astonishment. Delegates and dignitaries who had always admired or feared now looked upon her with suspicion. To them, a human, fragile, fleeting, mortal, could never deserve her. Some even considered it an insult to the traditions of the Galactic Alliance. The air around the observation deck grew tense, a storm forming before the sky itself changed. Felt the weight of their judgment immediately. Her wings stiffened slightly, her crimson eyes narrowing as she surveyed the crowd below. She had expected curiosity, perhaps some awe, but not this. She had never been challenged in this way, not by soldiers, nor diplomats, nor rivals. Yet here she stood beside Elias, a human who refused to step back, a human who refused to let fear govern his actions. One of her counselors hissed, appearing beside her almost silently. "You must leave him. This human cannot survive in your world. Our enemies would exploit this weakness. Your subjects, your allies, they cannot accept this. Do you not see the danger?" The queen did not turn to speak immediately. Instead, she looked at Elias, who stood calm and steady, unshaken by her counselor's words or the murmuring crowd. His presence reminded her of something she had long forgot. Courage could exist without fear. "I see the danger," she said finally, her voice low yet unwavering. "And yet he is here, not because he fears me, but because he chooses me. That choice is stronger than any rule or warning." Elias stepped forward, closing the small space between them. "I trust her," he said simply, looking directly at the counselor. "I trust her because I have seen her heart, and I know she would never let me fall." The counselor's eyes widened, shock and disbelief battling against centuries of protocol. They had never witnessed a mortal challenge the authority of the alien vampire queen and survive. Around them, other delegates began whispering again, some in awe, others in fear. For the first time, strength was not just in her power. It was in her ability to command loyalty through respect, through choice, through the courage of another being who dared to see her as more than legend. But the danger was real. Several delegations, unable to accept the pairing, began to maneuver strategically, intending to separate them. Sensed it immediately. She moved closer to Elias, her presence shielding him, wings unfurling slightly, not threateningly but warningly. Her claws brushed lightly along the floor, signaling that any who dared attack would face consequences they could not imagine. Elias looked at her, meeting her gaze with unwavering trust. "I am not afraid," he said softly, his voice carrying across the tense air. "I am here because I choose to be. I trust you." The statement struck the queen in ways she had never anticipated. Fear had been her companion for centuries, fear of betrayal, fear of weakness, fear of isolation. But this human, fragile and bold, had stepped into her life and faced her darkness without flinching. That simple act of trust ignited something in her, a protective fury, but also a warmth, a fragile thread of connection she had never allowed herself to feel. The delegation drew closer, daring to challenge her authority. Eyes flared, wings stretching wide, casting shadows across the deck like storm clouds. Her voice, low and commanding, cut through the tension. "Step back," she warned, each word carrying centuries of power. "You will not harm what I choose to protect." The crowd froze. None could deny the strength emanating from her. And yet there was something else in her posture, in her gaze toward Elias, a tenderness, a promise of protection, and a silent acknowledgement that this human mattered enough to risk everything. For the first time, the alien vampire queen realized that trust and courage were not just about self-preservation. They were about choosing someone, standing with them, and facing the world together, no matter how formidable the opposition. And in that moment, as the whispers of jealousy and fear circled around them, she knew something extraordinary was beginning. A bond forged not by obligation, not by power, but by choice and bravery, strong enough to defy even the deepest fears of the galaxy. The festival lights dimmed as the night deepened, leaving the observation deck bathed in the soft glow of distant stars. And Elias stood together, the galaxy stretching endlessly before them. For centuries, she had walked among stars like this alone, feeling only the emptiness of immortality. But now, beside him, the void felt smaller, almost manageable. His presence was like gravity, anchoring her, pulling her away from the isolation she had long accepted as her destiny. She hesitated, wings folding slightly as if unsure she could bear this closeness. "Humans are fragile," she said quietly, more to herself than to him. "I could hurt you without meaning to. I have dangers you cannot even imagine." Her crimson eyes flickered with vulnerability she rarely let show. Centuries of solitude had taught her to hide all weakness, yet here, in the soft hum of the stars, she could not hide from him. Elias reached out, placing his hand over hers, warm against her cold. "I know," he said softly, "and I am not afraid. I am here because I choose to be, not because I don't see the danger, but because I see you. You are more than your power, more than your fearsome legend. You are her." Those words struck something deep inside. Her chest tightened with a mixture of awe, fear, and longing. No one had ever spoken to her like this. They had bowed to her rule, feared her strength, admired her intellect. But never had anyone recognized the loneliness beneath it all. Never had anyone looked at her and chosen her in every sense of the word. Tears, rare and precious, threatened to spill. She had spent centuries watching others bond, laughing at joy she could not partake in, mourning moments she could never reclaim. And now this human with nothing but trust and courage offered her something she had never dared to dream of: acceptance, connection, and the fragile beginnings of love. I never thought anyone could see me," she whispered, voice trembling. "Not the queen, not the predator, not the centuries-old legend, just me." Her wings brushed lightly against the deck, a gesture of nervousness and openness. Elias smiled, a warmth that seemed to seep into the cold of her centuries. "I don't want a queen, I don't want a legend. I want you, every story, every secret, every fear. I want you, and I don't care about the universe's rules or warnings. I choose you." The queen's heart, long untouched by such simple honesty, pounded fiercely. Centuries of power could not protect her from this moment. The vulnerability, the raw, unguarded truth of connection. For the first time, she let herself lean into it, resting her head lightly against his shoulder, feeling a human's warmth for the first time in what felt like eternity. I don't know if I can do this," she admitted, voice small. "I am dangerous, untested, and immortal. You are only human. Why would you risk yourself for me?" Because some things are worth the risk, Elias replied simply. Some people are worth the risk. You are worth it. You always have been. The stars reflected in her eyes as she finally allowed herself to feel hope. A fragile, trembling hope that perhaps she did not have to endure centuries of loneliness. Perhaps there was a place for her beside someone who truly chose her, who trusted her even in the face of danger. For the first time in her long existence, allowed herself to imagine a life that was not governed solely by fear, duty, or power. A life where someone could walk beside her, share her triumphs and sorrows, and accept every shadow and light within her. In that quiet moment beneath the endless galaxy, she realized that hope was not weakness. It was the first step toward a future she had never dared to believe in. Elias squeezed her hand, sensing the transformation. "We'll face the dangers together," he said. "Every risk, every challenge, every fear, you are not alone anymore." Looked out at the stars, her wings folding around them both protectively. For the first time, she believed it. She was not alone. And perhaps for the first time in centuries, she was ready to live not just as a queen, but as someone capable of love. The final night of the festival arrived, the grand hall illuminated by millions of floating lights that reflected off the crystalline walls. Every species gathered for the ceremonial pairing, a tradition celebrating unity and companionship. Beings of all shapes and sizes were matched with their chosen partners, laughter and music filling the air. Yet in the midst of all this joy, all eyes eventually turned toward. The alien vampire queen had always been untouchable, feared, and admired. Now a human stood beside her, unbowed and unafraid. Whispers began almost immediately. A human beside her. Is he truly brave or foolish? The queen chooses someone so fragile. The murmurs carried across the hall, but Elias remained steady, his gaze never leaving hers. He did not flinch, did not hesitate. To everyone watching, he appeared almost ordinary, a human, fragile and small. But beside, he seemed larger than life, his courage shining brighter than any warrior's armor. His wings lifted slightly, catching the light in a shimmering display of silver and black. Her heart beat faster than it had in centuries. She had fought countless battles, negotiated peace and war alike, but this was a different kind of challenge. She had to make a choice, and unlike the wars she had won, the stakes here were of the heart, not of land or power. The counselors, dignitaries, and delegates watched intently. Some were horrified, unable to comprehend why a queen would allow a human to approach, let alone choose him. Others leaned forward with curiosity, seeing for the first time a queen not as a legend, but as a being capable of connection. Took a deep breath, her gaze meeting Elias. In his eyes, she saw trust, courage, and acceptance. The things no empire, no crown, no army had ever given her. "I choose him," she said finally, her voice carrying across the hall, calm yet unwavering. The words were simple, but the weight behind them was immense. She had chosen not just a human, but connection, vulnerability, and the possibility of love. Every eye in the hall widened, some in shock, some in admiration, and some in disbelief. Elias stepped forward, taking her hand without hesitation. "And I choose her," he declared, voice steady, carrying across the stunned silence. "Not because she is a queen, not because she is a legend, but because she is. She is the one I want completely, without fear or doubt." The hall seemed to pause, holding its collective breath. This pairing expectations, tradition, and yet there was an undeniable truth in the moment. The human who had dared to see the queen for who she truly was had been met with the queen's courage in return. Together they stood, not ruler and subject, not predator and prey, but equals, partners by choice. Delegates who had whispered warnings now looked on with quiet awe. Some realized that the strength of trust and bravery could surpass the power of fear and tradition. Others saw the courage in the human, and it became clear that sometimes the smallest, most fragile beings could inspire change in even the mightiest hearts. Wings folded softly around them, not as a shield, but as a gentle embrace of the bond they shared. The crimson glow of her eyes softened, and she allowed herself a rare smile, one that spoke of relief, joy, and the fragile beginnings of hope. Elias squeezed her hand, a silent promise that he would walk beside her through anything, no matter how difficult, no matter how impossible it seemed. For the first time, the alien vampire queen felt a lightness she had never known. Fear and solitude melted away in the warmth of trust and choice. Around them, the festival continued, but for Elias, the world had narrowed to this single, perfect moment. the moment they chose each other, fully and without reservation. And as the lights of the hall shimmered above them, and the distant music carried on through the night, realized that history would remember the legends of warriors and battles. But she would remember this. The human who dared to walk into her shadow and stay, the bond that expectation, and the quiet truth that even the strongest needed someone who chose them with courage, heart, and love. The festival lights slowly dimmed as the last of the delegates departed, leaving the grand hall echoing with whispers of awe and disbelief. The Galactic Alliance would speak of this night for decades, the night a human dared to walk beside the alien vampire queen and be chosen in return. Yet for an Elias, the world beyond the hall no longer mattered. Around them, the stars stretched endlessly, painting the cosmos with shimmering light, as if the universe itself celebrated their union. Wings, once symbols of fear and power, now moved with grace and calm, folding gently behind her. She looked at Elias, whose eyes reflected the same wonder and quiet triumph that she felt. Neither needed to speak. The bond between them had already been sealed by choice, courage, and trust. She had feared solitude for centuries, and now she realized that the emptiness had been a shadow waiting for someone to step into the light beside her. "You changed everything," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of relief and joy. "No one has ever chosen me, not truly." Elias took her hands in his, holding them carefully, as if the weight of their journey rested in that simple touch. "I chose you because I see you," he said softly. "Not the queen, not the vampire, not the legend. Just you, the person who has carried so much alone for so long." Her crimson eyes glistened with unshed tears. She had ruled empires, outlived generations, and survived countless wars, but nothing in her immortal life compared to this feeling, being seen, being wanted, and being understood. Her heart, long hardened by centuries of command, softened. For the first time, she allowed herself to dream, not of power or victory, but of a future she could share with another being. As they stood together on the observation deck, the stars twinkling like a million tiny flames, a small group of delegates who had lingered approached. There was hesitation in their steps, awe in their faces. They had come to witness the impossible and realized that it had happened. Their whispers were no longer of doubt, but of respect and wonder. "She chose him," one whispered, "and he matched her courage. He faced fear that would break most others." His gaze swept across the crowd, and for the first time she smiled openly. She was no longer isolated, no longer untouchable, no longer alone in her strength. Her power remained immense and undeniable, but it was no longer a barrier. It was a bridge, connecting her to someone who understood and accepted her completely. Elias leaned closer, his hand brushing lightly against her face. "We'll face everything together," he promised. "Every challenge, every fear, every danger. You are not alone anymore." Felt warmth seep into her bones, a sensation so foreign and yet so vital that it made her wings flutter with quiet joy. She had spent centuries imagining companionship, but now she understood. True connection was not about perfection, fearlessness, or legend. It was about choice, courage, and trust, the willingness to step into someone's life and walk beside them no matter what. As the festival lights finally faded and the crowds returned to their homes, and Elias remained on the observation deck, standing side by side beneath the infinite galaxy. Together, they were a symbol of hope and unity. Not just a queen and a human, but equals, partners, and pioneers of something greater than fear or tradition. And as the stars shimmered around them, realized that history would remember warriors and battles, but she would remember this night. The night a human changed everything. The night she learned that even the mightiest could be vulnerable. And the night she finally discovered that love, trust, and courage could create a legacy far greater than any throne or empire. Together they stepped forward into a future uncharted and boundless, their hands clasped, hearts intertwined, and spirits unbroken. For the first time in centuries, felt truly alive, not as a queen of fear, but as a being capable of love, hope, and the promise of a new legacy written among the stars.